The Utah Utes just demolished the Cincinnati Bearcats, and the Big 12 should be terrified of this Utah Utes team right now.
You are Locked On Utes, your daily podcast on the Utah Utes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for making Locked On Utes your first listen and view of the day. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, available wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube. If it's your first time joining us, make sure you like and subscribe, and huge shout out to those of you who do make us your first listen every single day. We appreciate you everydayers greatly. Today's episode brought to you by GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege, all caps, no spaces, for $20 off your first purchase. My name is JT Wichita, excited to be joined by the host of the Run and Hoops pod, Andrew Crowley. Andrew, really appreciate you making the time to come on with me here. And we're going to talk about some Utah men's and women's basketball in a little bit, but we have to start with what the football team did on Saturday. This is Utah's first win over what I deem a really good team. Yes, they beat a ranked Arizona State team at the time, backup quarterback in. Granted, that backup quarterback did just go on the road and beat Iowa State, so that's something. That's not nothing. But still, like this Cincinnati team, you had College Game Day there. The eyes were all on you. Your only two losses came to the other fully healthy ranked teams you played, and it just demolished Cincinnati that way, 45-14. I was skeptical if Utah could cover the spread because I liked that Cincinnati team, but this Utah team is firing on all cylinders right now. This is the type of team that a lot of people in the country and their power ratings have as like the best or second best team in the Big 12. If I was any Big 12 team right now, and we got to wait another week till we see this Utah team because of the bye, but if I was another Big 12 team, Andrew, I would not want any part of the Utah Utes right now.
Yeah, I mean, going into this game, it felt like Utah had a bit of a big game problem. And coming out of the game, I don't think there's any concern about that whatsoever. You know, just really controlled the game from start to finish. Gave up a few big plays here and there, but nothing that really, impacted the game in a negative way long term. And just, imposed their will in the second half. And Cincinnati just kind of gave up.
They really did. It got to the point where Cincinnati was just, I mean, they didn't even know what to do. It felt like offensively, and just the pressure we were bringing, their offensive line. And that's the funny. Sorsby actually never got sacked, but that is really misleading for how much pressure Utah consistently caused and threw him off in this game. And the reason I say the Big 12 as a whole should be very scared of this Utah team right now is I believe they are arguably, I'd say, the second most complete team in this conference. Now, offense and defense, like total-wise, the numbers actually do show that too. But when you watch the games right now, this Utah team, just the level of dominance they display, right? Like against this Cincinnati, you hold them to just 14 points. And we thought in the first quarter, like, hey, they look good on their first drive. But then they had that turnover. How big was that forced fumble from Jonathan Hall? And this Utah team is just blowing everyone out right now. A reminder, if you look at Utah's 3 of their last 4 games outside of the BYU loss, Arizona State 42-10, Colorado 53-7, Cincinnati 45-14. You can look at what a lot of the other comparable Big 12 teams did in games against those teams, and it is nowhere near the level of dominance that Utah displayed right now. The physicality on the offensive line, and I think the pressure that Utah brings defensively right now are why, if I was another Big 12 team like a Kansas, a Baylor, a Kansas State, and maybe if Utah gets in the Big 12 title game, I would be like, oh, I do not want to play Utah right now. And they're getting their respect nationally too, Andrew, all the way up to 17 in the AP poll. See where they are in the college football rankings. But that was the biggest jump along with Texas and Oklahoma and Utah. Those 3 programs all jumped up 7 spots in the AP poll. And Utah just looking incredibly strong right now. And I love that they're getting that national respect too.
Great week to have a statement win over another ranked team with the college football playoff rankings coming out this week. Obviously, it's just the first week of those rankings, but still, it sort of sets the tone for, how you're going to be evaluated the rest of the year. Their only 2 losses are to teams that are probably going to be in the top 10, top 12 of those rankings, right? And so, Utah's in a position right now where, as you mentioned, they're firing on all cylinders. Their best is better than a lot of other people. And if they can just kind of keep that momentum going and let some chaos happen ahead of them, who knows what happens?
Yeah, who knows what happens. That's the nice thing for this Utah team right now. But the other thing that was really nice to see was Devin Dampier was back out there. Andrew, this, I don't know if it was his best game overall. And he was, I mean, it's hard to pick. Like, there really isn't many things I can say he did wrong, but there's just been games where he's also been incredibly good. This might have been his most impressive performance throwing the ball, I felt like, too. He just looked comfortable, confident, in control, made the right reads. He had the one bad throw on third down that I wish we could have back, but that one interception. But still, 213 yards, 2 touchdowns, ran it. This is like his 14 carries for 78 yards. He had a couple of scrambles. Like, that's something I feel like we haven't seen from him as much this year, the scrambles, because he's been used so much in the quarterback design run game that he's taken those hits that he hasn't scrambled as much, but he had some huge scrambles in this game too. I love the way Dampier played. If this is the Dampier that Utah gets the rest of the season, they are capable of, even if they got into the college football playoff, to me, they're capable of upsetting some major players, because with this offensive line, with the defensive line, with how good the secondary is playing right now, you got this guy at quarterback playing that way. I once again would not want to see this Utah team.
Well, I think you nailed it with the description of comfortable and confident. I mean, that mental piece of it is half the battle, maybe 75% of the battle. Mm-hmm. And Dampier finally looks comfortable and confident, and they're finally starting to call some plays that isn't just, power run for the quarterback. And they've got Bray that they can, mix in there. Wayshawn Parker, I think, is doing a lot of really good things. And Nakari Rogers, like, they're taking pressure off of him, which is making him, not have to, process as much stuff, think about as much stuff. And now he can just go out and kind of ball out, and it's working.
It is working wonders for this Utah team right now. And what's also working is the defense right now. Whether it is the pressure from Morgan Scalley, John Henry Daly, even if he doesn't get a sack, being one of the best defensive ends in college football, linebackers, Jonathan Hall, Lander Barton, even Trey Reynolds and DeMooney when they are out there. Yesterday was a lot of Lander and Jonathan Hall, but the backups, I think, do well too. But this Utah team has so many elite players. When you lose Cameron Calhoun and Zemiah Vaughn, I was worried the secondary would get worse. Honestly, Andrew, as we sit here this far into the season, and maybe some of it's the pressure they bring, they might have gotten better. I mean, Blake Cotton and Elijah Scooby Davis have been so good, and we knew Smith Snowden was really good. Yes, he gave up one big play, Smith Snowden did yesterday. With what Utah asks their cornerbacks to do, it's just not like, I'm sure the team is on him about correcting and fixing those things. Like, to me, I'm not like it's the end of the world because of the style of aggressiveness that Utah plays. I'm okay giving up the 180-yard touchdown pass, because so many times Utah does their job defensively, and the style they play leads to them holding offenses in check. But how good the cornerbacks have looked, especially some of those new guys. Adon Saunders got in yesterday and looked good too. That cornerback group has been really impressive, and maybe their best performance yesterday against what I consider a well-rounded Cincinnati wide receiver group.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, it's one of the challenges of playing man defense, right? Like, occasionally you're going to give up the big play, but you got to rely on those corners to be in good positions, the safeties to be in good positions. And ultimately they're going to, in this defense, historically, they have made more plays than they've given up. I think we'll continue to see that from this group as well, to your point about Smith Snowden, right? Like, he was Johnny on the spot when their quarterback threw it off the guy's helmet. He takes it, and then of course he fumbles it, but still, right, gets the interception. So I think, I love the secondary. I love what this defense is doing, the pressure that they put on teams. Even the guys, the defensive linemen, getting their hands up and batting down passes and stuff like that. Like, those are the little things that I think we didn't necessarily see in the Texas Tech game, in the BYU game, where the games are won in those margins. And if they're going to, play this way moving forward, I don't see any reason why they won't be in the mix.
I totally agree. They need some things to go their way, as we said. They don't control their own destiny, but man, do they look dangerous right now. One of the best offensive lines in the Big 12, one of the best group of corners in the Big 12, and Morgan Scalley, and then Jason Beck. I don't know why I blanked out his name for a moment. He has been fantastic too right now, and Utah seems to have learned from some of their mistakes, and they're blowing the Big 12 out. So I'd look out right now. We got to wait a little bit till we get some more Utah football, but we don't have to wait for Utah men's and women's basketball. Their seasons get underway this week. We're going to be breaking down what we expect from the men's team this season in one moment. Today's episode of Locked On Utes is brought to you by our friends at GameTime. College football and basketball are officially back, and I couldn't be more excited to have both. The tailgates, the rivalries, the energy in the stands. There's just nothing like it. But let's be real, actually getting tickets can feel like more of a battle than the game itself. Endless queues, hidden fees, prices jumping at checkouts. It all can be a massive headache. But that's why I use GameTime, the app that gives the advantage back to fans. It's the easiest way to score last-minute tickets at the best prices with no surprise fees. What you see is actually what you pay. I pulled up GameTime, and in just a couple taps, I saw amazing deals. I'm talking about your favorite college football games as low as $10. The app made it super simple. I could even see the exact view from my seat before buying. Honestly, it's faster, cheaper, and less stressful than any other way I've bought tickets. So take the guesswork out of buying college football tickets with GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege, all caps, no spaces, for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download GameTime today. Andrew, we've been talking about it for a long time. The start of the Alex Jensen era is finally here. Later tonight, we are going to see this Utah men's basketball program in action, and I can't wait to get this season underway. I think it's going to be one where Utah begins to turn a corner of optimism for Utah basketball. You know, last year they finished 11th. We were talking about it before the show. Does that mean they're going to be better than that? And if they're not, should we be concerned? I don't even think so. I think what you want to see this year is the culture back in place, a style of play that gets fans excited for the future. Building rosters is tougher in the transfer portal. Building cultures in some ways is too. But that's what this season is going to be for. It all gets underway tonight. I cannot wait to see Alex Jensen and this new collection of players, because a reminder, there's only one returner from last season.
Yeah, KD. Thank goodness, right? Thank goodness he's back. It's super exciting, right? Just to see what Alex Jensen does. You know, he and Wes Wilcox have talked so much in the offseason about all of the non-negotiables, the things that they want their team to be known for in terms of defense and effort and all of those things. And we start to see what that looks like in earnest here tonight against San Jose State. They've got kind of a 6-game ramp up here before they really get challenged in their schedule. And so there's just a lot of things to be positive about, a lot of things to feel good about. To your point, who knows what they're going to look like against Big 12 competition, but we'll get there, right? Like, that's a problem for January, right? Like, I'm just excited to have these guys back. We've been talking about this for months on my show. I've been, I've gone through every single possible preview thing I can think of, and now it's time to start talking about games, and I'm ready. I'm super excited.
We're all super excited. And you mentioned it is such an interesting schedule. Really play no one. San Jose State's probably their toughest game of that first 6. And, ESPN Predictor right now gives them a 90% chance to win that game even. So should be 6-0. Get an interesting test against the Grand Canyon team that can always be decent too. Not long after that, you get a Cal team. Their coach Madsen coming over from Utah Valley a couple of years ago. I like what he does. I think he does a good job there. So I'm curious to see what this team looks like. But as I said, Andrew, in some ways, we're very curious just to see. We've gotten some exhibition games in so far, but there's still a lot to be determined about this roster. I know Terrence Brown is a guy they're excited for. We already mentioned Keanu Dawes being a key returner too. Who are a couple of the key guys that you think are going to define this basketball season for the Utah Utes?
Yeah, well, I think Keanu Dawes certainly has a chance to average a double-double this year. I mean, he's Johnny on the spot with rebounds. I think most games – you're going to look up at the box score in the first half, and it's going to be like, holy crap, Dawes already has 8 rebounds. You know what I mean? Yeah. So he's going to be a key cog for this team, especially as they're a little bit undersized in the front court. Terrence Brown, Don McHenry, if those two can play together in the backcourt, I think that's going to give them a lot of flexibility in terms of ball handling, in terms of, just getting guys to the hoop. I actually am really high on Jacob Patrick as the 3-point threat on this team. Like, I think he's got one job. His job is going to be to run to the corner and knock down threes, or, get a 3 off of a second chance opportunity. And then you've got the athletic upside of Chopamore, Jakai Howard, and Seydou Traore. Like, all 3 of those guys on a given night are going to have wow plays, right? That are really going to get people out of their seats. And so, if Alex can bring this group together, can get them to buy in on the defensive end, I think it's going to be, it could be a challenging season, no question, but I think it's going to be a fun season with the group of players that they have.
I agree. What have you liked so far that Alex Jensen you feel like does differently than Craig Smith? And what do you feel like, just do you, after watching some of these exhibition games early on, what should Utah fans just expect from Coach Jensen, the style of basketball he likes to play?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, all of us had a little PTSD when we saw when we were watching or saw the Oregon, race out to a 17-0 lead. It was like, oh, I've seen this movie before at Oregon, especially. But I think the fact that the team kept fighting, I didn't see them giving up at any given point, right? They went up against a team that was more talented than they were, that was playing at home. They had a 7-footer that Utah couldn't account for because our tallest guy's like 6'8", and so I just think that, in that particular instance, just watching the team continue to play, continue to fight hard. Terrence Brown got bottled up early in that game, still led the team in scoring. Don McHenry had some real nice plays. The freshmen looked really good. Kendall Sanders and Obamate Abbey. I know I'm like naming the entire roster here, but but in terms of what's different, I think that they're going to have to lock in on the defensive end. And if they don't, they're probably not going to play as much, right? Like, I think that that's one of those non-negotiable things that Alex brings with him, gets from Rick Majerus, and so I think we're going to see the effort there.
I totally agree. Two things to know about the Utah men's basketball team. Number one, who we thought was probably going to be their starting center this year, a Western Kentucky transfer, Babacar Faye. I believe I'm saying his first name correctly, but Faye out with a season-ending injury. That's a massive blow to this team. You already mentioned the size, so we'll talk about how Utah can deal with that a little bit more in a second. But honestly, one of the ways I would say Utah can deal with that is Jakai Howard, who's by far the biggest X factor on this team to me. The former Auburn transfer was a 5-star commit for Bruce Pearl at the time. Now, though, he had a lot of issues with that Auburn team, a lot of off-the-court stuff, but his ceiling is clearly higher than anyone else on this team. So I guess 2 questions, Andrew. How do you think Utah deals with the absence of Faye this year? And then what are your expectations for Howard?
Well, I think Josh Hayes is going to end up being a bigger part of the team than maybe he was originally going to be, just because they're going to need that rim protection. And he's a lengthy kind of JUCO kid there in the middle, 6'10", 6'11". I think that they're going to use Keanu Dawes to pull the other team's bigs out of the paint as kind of a stretch 5 at times. And then Jakai Howard, he's got to do a little bit more than what we've seen from him in these 2 exhibitions. And what we've really seen from him is shooting threes. Right. And I think that he's got to have a drive game. He's got to, I think he and Terrence Brown and he and Don McHenry can really get that lob game going in the paint as well. And so he's just got to, I think, maybe relax, take a little pressure off of himself and just kind of let the game come to him and just let that talent speak for itself. Because, in the 2 exhibitions that I watched him in, felt like he was pushing a little bit.
Yeah. It's so interesting for this team. We're just 2 years removed from Brandon Carlson and why am I forgetting the name of the center transfer?
Lawson Lovering.
Thank you. Both of those guys starting. So you're basically, they were both 7 foot, right?
Yeah.
2 7-footers starting. There's no one on this roster right now who's 7 feet tall as I look at it. So that's the crazy thing. You have no 7-footers. So it's going to be a little bit of an undersized team. It's difficult to do that in the Big 12 a little bit, which leads me into my next question. Andrew, this team.
Before you get to that question,
go. Yeah.
That's NBA champion Brandon Carlson.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And NBA champion Dylan Jones on that roster too from Weber State last year.
That's right.
The state of Utah may not always win in the NCAA tournament, but we're at least winning right now. And I guess
we just produce champions. It's what we do.
Exactly. We produce Kyle Kuzma. So, and DeLon Wright what was DeLon Wright listed as recently that I saw? That ESPN thing. Do you remember that?
That escapes me, but I'm sure. Yeah. But all of the Utes in the NBA are impact guys, right? Yes. So,
And hopefully there'll be some more under Alex Jensen. One of the questions this year, though, is how good will this team be in the Big 12? If you look at the preseason poll, Utah projected to finish 13th overall. Do you feel that's fair? And what do you think of the rest of the hoops in the conference?
I think that it's fair to people who probably are looking at this team on paper, right? I think I did a full Big 12 preview on my show like 3 episodes, all 15 teams, and then Utah. I've got Utah at 10, so I've got them a little bit higher than some of the Big 12 talking heads. A lot of them like West Virginia and Oklahoma State and UCF a little bit better than I do. But I think that their range, right, is probably anywhere from 10 to 14. I don't see them finishing at the bottom. I could certainly see them finishing worse than their 11th finish last year, just because a couple of teams have really leveled up in the talent that they have. And there's a lot of consistency with the coaching as well, right? Only 2 new coaches in the league, Alex Jensen and Ross Hodge at West Virginia. Shouts to our guy, Mountaineer Paul. But yeah, I mean, I think for people who are not, super invested in understanding what Utah has, it probably makes sense that they voted them 13.
Hey, every coach loves playing the underdog card. Alex
That's right.
Jensen can absolutely play it this year. You know who else can play it? Gavin Peters and the women's basketball team. What's the women's basketball team in for this year? That's what we're talking about in one moment. But first, today's episode of Locked On Utes is brought to you by our great friends at FanDuel Sportsbook. The NBA and college basketball are both back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you missed the start of the game or want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. Keeps every game exciting, especially when your team's making that late push. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet hits. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up today and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. And what a great start the NBA is off to this year. We were just talking about Brandon Carlson and hey, how about the Thunder from last year? They're defending their title pretty well this year. I'm a Timberwolves fan, so I'm hoping they can start to figure it out without Anthony Edwards. Jazz had Lauri Markkanen go for 50 recently. And hey, how about the Utah Utes? If you're thinking football, I'm feeling good about Utah against pretty much every team they play the rest of the way. And obviously you did well if you bet the Utah Utes on the over against Cincinnati. So you can head over to FanDuel right now and check out all the odds and lines on all of your favorite sporting events. Andrew, it's Gavin Peters' season once again for the Utah women's basketball program. Last year was named the interim coach late in the game, head coach, but late in the game. But it was still like right before the year started. It was kind of a crazy cycle and things, but he took over. I thought he did a good job, but no question about it. This is a new era for the Utah women's basketball team. Jenna Johnson's on the sideline because she's like a volunteer coach now. Gianna Neepkins, UCLA, big sad about that. But Inez is gone as well, too. Kennedy McQueen is gone. So there was this era of Utah women's basketball for about 4 years. Really, Jenna Johnson, I'd say, and Neepkins were like the consistent faces, part of that first team that surged to the Pac-12 title against Oregon. Then Alyssa Peely came in, had a fun run with that group, too. And last year was kind of their last hurrah. Made the NCAA tournament, but didn't do anything there. So it's a new era for women's basketball. It's the first full season where Gavin Peters has had an off season under him as head coach. What are your expectations for the Utah women's basketball program in the Big 12?
Yeah, I think they're going to surprise some folks. I really like the makeup of this roster and what they did. Obviously, like you said, you can't understate, losing the 4, seniors that they lost, certainly in their production. But I think it's one of those, greater than the sum of the parts type teams. And, having Reese Ross back, who's their leading rebounder from a year ago, Maddie Wilkie is their leading returning scorer. Those are 2 great foundational pieces. Kyra Evans comes in off of an injury. She was really productive at Michigan. I think folks are probably sleeping on her a little bit. 3 super talented freshmen, in addition to some other transfer portal additions, the return of Lonnie White and, Cameron Maffau coming in from Cal. So I think that this team is going to be built to really surprise some folks. They're going to have that chip on their shoulder that maybe the previous couple haven't had because they've had so much success. And I'm excited to see how this team performs. They're going to get a massive test in just a few weeks against UConn in Connecticut. And so that's going to be a real measuring stick game for them as well. But I like their chances this year in the Big 12 to certainly outperform their preseason projection, which was 8th.
They start so much different than the men's team. Men's team's got a bunch of cupcakes. Like that's just what it is. Women's team, not as much. Now, granted, by the time you're listening to this show, they should absolutely, well, depending, they should absolutely have their first win of the year. Sioux Falls, I believe it is, comes to town. And at 11 a.m., they'll be in the John M. Huntsman Center. That should be a win for Utah. But then even a Utah State, a Utah Valley, Washington, Syracuse, all before UConn. Utah not going easy in their non-conference schedule, Andrew.
No, and they were supposed to open with San Diego State, and the Aztecs backed out because they wanted to play a game against UCLA. And so they get a little bit of a soft landing here with Sioux Falls. That's that 11 a.m. tip. It's a bunch of, elementary school kids are going to be in town for that. So bring your earplugs potentially if you're going to that game. But yeah, the back end of a home and home with Washington, that should be very interesting. Road trip in their second game of the season up to Logan to Utah State. I mean, the D Event Center it's not what it is for the men's games, but it's still a road trip. And so, they're going to be battle tested well before their conference play starts, and certainly before they play Connecticut and Syracuse in that event.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what this team looks like. You mentioned a couple names earlier, Andrew, but who do you think will be some of the standout players, and what do you even expect the rotation to look like for a Utah women's basketball roster that, when you look at it, just looks so different than even a couple years ago because of how many players they lost, and they had to get younger too because of all those departures.
Yeah, well, Reese Ross, I think, jumps to the front of the line for me. Like she's just got all of those things that you want in a player, right? Like she's tough. She's tenacious. She doesn't mess around with, you just don't cross her, right? Like she's going to be, I think, a huge factor for Utah. And then this freshman point guard, L.A. Sneed, she came in the exhibition win over, I think it was Western Oregon or something like that, and really kind of shined as well. Maddie Wilkie will be a steady hand in the backcourt to help bring along some of the younger players. And so those are just a couple for me. But I really like, and of course, Lonnie White. I think Lonnie White is going to replace some of that scoring punch that they lost with Gianna Neepkins leaving and Kennedy McQueen graduating. And so, I think that the thing that's nice about this team is that they've got options, right? There's a ton of options. You're not relying so much on one player that the opposition can take away. And I think we saw that last year, where, teams in the Big 12 were like, okay, well, if we take Gianna away, it's going to be a lot harder for them to score. And it was,
It was, and it's going to be a really interesting year for the Utah women's basketball program. Andrew, there's actually just one last thing I want to talk about. I think it's such a bad look that the Big 12 did away with the football preseason poll, but they did it for both men's and women's basketball. Like, I think that is such a bad look as a conference. I know the whole thing was like, well, it hurt Arizona State. It really didn't end up hurting Arizona State. I think they got ranked and seeded where they belong to. And the Big 12 is a conference of chaos. Like, we just know that it is. Honestly, the Big 12 preseason poll would actually be looking pretty decent right now. Maybe people had BYU a little lower than they should have been, but Tech would be right towards the top of everyone. Utah would be sitting right towards the top of everyone's list right now. I think it's such a bad look. You get rid of it for football, but then for both basketballs, you're like, oh no, it's fine. We'll continue to do it. I think that's a bad look.
Well, the thing that was so funny about it too is that they released the Big 12 coaches polls in advance of media day, and then like randomly last week they released the media polls, and so it wasn't even like connected to Big 12 media day, so you couldn't, so they couldn't ask the coaches and players about it or anything like that, and. So it was a little bit of a clunky release in that instance, but I agree with you. I mean, we all know what preseason polls are, right? Like they're not necessarily to be taken seriously, but they at least provide us with a little bit of a barometer of, where we are. It's kind of like preseason bracketology, right? Like you go into the season, if you're Utah and you say, okay, well, we've got, Iowa and Ole Miss, that's, we're going to play one of those teams. They're projected to get into the field, right? Mississippi State's projected to get in the field. So like you start to at least have an idea of where your opportunities are going to be. And you can build some excitement that way, right? Like when you don't have that, it's just kind of like, okay, let's go start the season then, I guess.
Yeah. It's weird. And I'm going to tell y'all something right now. That's 1000% true. Every single coach we don't care about preseason rankings. Like we don't look at it. They see. And they see his motivation if they're not number one. Every single one of them looks at it. The players, we don't care about preseason rankings. bull crap. Y'all look at it and y'all use it as motivation. You can say the right things to the media, but we know they all see and acknowledge it, and they just tuck it away in their back of their heads as extra motivation. But it's going to be so much fun to see what this Utah season turns out for both men's and women's basketball, and continuing to follow along with the football program as well too. But Andrew, people do want to stay up to date on especially Utah men's basketball. Where do they need to head over to?
Yeah, so I'm over on the socials at Runnin' Hoops Pod over on X, and then Runnin' Hoops Podcast, wherever you get a podcast. I've got an entire I did an entire week last week of preview content for the Big 12, for the Runnin' Utes, for the Utah women's basketball team. I've got a preview up for San Jose State, everything you could want. And you're probably only going to get a preview of, Holy Cross here in a couple of weeks on my podcast. So just check that out, Runnin' Hoops Pod, Runnin' Hoops Podcast, wherever you get a podcast.
Andrew, thank you for joining me, and congratulations to you on making it to the end of the offseason. It is always a long journey. It's something that I know we have to get through as well, especially with football stuff for me. So congrats on making it through the end of the offseason, my friend. And thank you all for listening to Locked On Utes. And Andrew, thank you again for stopping by.
Yeah.
That's going to do it for today's Locked On Utes. We'll be back with you tomorrow. Talk about, well, actually, we don't have a Kyle Whittingham press conference, but we're going to talk about the state of the Big 12 currently and how Utah could get into the Big 12 championship game. That and more on tomorrow's show. We'll see you then.